Have you ever looked into the eyes of an animal and felt a story burning inside them? Today, I'll take you on a journey into the life of Ember, a wolf dog who once lived in chains destined for a cruel end. But what happened next changed not only her life, but also the hearts of everyone who met her. Before we dive into this powerful story, don't forget to subscribe and join our community of wildlife lovers. Each video brings you closer to the hidden world of animals who fight for survival and freedom. Imagine this deep in the mountains of Colorado, where the wind howls through endless pine trees. Rescuers discovered a cage. Inside, a pair of golden eyes glowed faintly in the dark. A wolf-dog hybrid, nearly 95%. Wolf, her fur matted her body trembling. Her name would become Ember. But at that moment, Ember was no symbol of hope. She was frightened, scarred, and broken. The sound of human footsteps made her recoil into the farthest corner of her cage. She had been raised not as a companion, not as a creature of the wild, but as a prisoner, bred for her fur, kept alive for profit. The rescuers stood frozen. This was not a dog that wagged its tail. This was not a wild wolf ready to bolt into the forest. Ember was something in between, caught in a cruel paradox of human making. As the metal door creaked open, the cold air rushed in. Ember's hackles raised, her eyes darted left, right. Was this freedom or another trick? The rescuers knew that one wrong move could undo everything. Wolf dogs cannot simply be released into the wild. They cannot be kept as pets. And Ember was so fragile that a single mishandling could push her past the edge. So what did they do? They waited. Minutes stretched into hours. They whispered softly. One of them crouched low, avoiding eye contact, simply leaving a piece of food within reach. Ember's body shook. Hunger gnawed at her ribs. Her instincts battled fear against survival. And then, she took a step forward. It was the smallest movement. But for Ember, it was the first spark. A spark that would ignite an incredible journey from captivity to trust, from terror to freedom. What happened after that step? How did a broken wolf dog learn to trust again? The answer surprised everyone, even the rescuers themselves. And it may just surprise you too. To truly understand Ember's story, we need to step back and meet the people and the place that would change her fate forever. Because every rescue is not just about the animal, it's about the land that shapes them and the humans who decide to stand by their side. High in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado lies the WOLF Sanctuary. It's not a zoo, not a tourist attraction, but a hidden refuge where wolf dogs hybrids too wild to be pets, too tame to survive in the wild, are given a second chance. For decades, the sanctuary has opened its gates to the broken, the abandoned, and the misunderstood. Here, behind tall fences and dense forests, each rescued wolf dog has a story. Some were chained in backyards, others kept in cramped cages for profit, still others discarded when their owners realized they could not be controlled. Wolf dogs are powerful, unpredictable, and misunderstood. Many end up euthanized simply because people don't know what else to do. But Ember's arrival would test the sanctuary in ways they had never imagined. At the heart of this sanctuary is Sarah, a quiet, determined volunteer. She wasn't born into this work. She was once a teacher in a small town, spending weekends hiking through Colorado's rugged landscapes. But a chance encounter with a rescue wolf dog years ago ignited something inside her, a sense of duty, of compassion. She joined WOLF as a volunteer, never expecting how deeply these animals would change her. When Sarah first heard about Ember, she didn't yet know the details. The message that reached the sanctuary was simple. Wolf dog female malnourished needs immediate transfer. For Sarah, those words were enough. She cleared her schedule, packed her boots, and prepared for another mission. But what she would find would leave her breathless. The drive into the mountains is long, winding, and often dangerous. Snow piles high on the shoulders of the road in winter, while in summer, thunderstorms sweep down without warning. The sanctuary itself sits hidden among tall pines and granite cliffs, a place where the howls of rescued wolf dogs echo through the valley. It was here that Ember would begin her new life. But it wouldn't be simple. Sarah remembers her first impression vividly. Ember was not like the others. She did not pace the fence lines like a restless wolf, nor approach curiously like some hybrids do. Instead, she crouched low, trembling, her golden eyes never leaving the humans before her. Her fur was a tangled mess of gray and black, her body marked by scars both seen and unseen. "She looks like she's carrying the weight of 1,000 storms," Sarah whispered that day. Ember's past was pieced together slowly. She had been bred in captivity, likely part of a fur farm operation, where animals are raised not for love or companionship, but for coats and profit. Somewhere along the way, she had been sold or traded, then abandoned. By the time rescuers found her, she was a shell of what a wolf dog should be, hungry, fearful, and hollow. The sanctuary team knew what they were up against. Wolf dogs are not easily rehabilitated. Their instincts pull them toward the wild, yet they lack the full skills of wolves. They can be affectionate one moment and unpredictable the next. And Ember, with her history of trauma, would need far more than food and shelter. She would need patience. She would need time. She would need someone willing to sit with her through silence. That someone was Sarah. Day after day, Sarah climbed the hill to Ember's enclosure. She carried buckets of food, fresh water, sometimes a blanket to sit on. But most of all, she carried her presence steady, calm, unthreatening. She would read aloud, her voice soft and even. She would hum, letting Ember grow used to the rhythm of her sound. She never rushed, never reached out too soon. Because with animals like Ember, trust is not given, it is earned. And all the while the Colorado wilderness stretched around them, the sharp peaks of the Rockies, the dense pine forests where real wolves still roam unseen, the clear mountain air carrying scents of deer elk and coyotes. For Ember, who had only known cages and confinement, this world was overwhelming. She could hear the wild calling, yet she could not answer it. The sanctuary stood as a middle ground, a bridge between captivity and freedom. And within it, Sarah and Ember began to form a bond that neither expected. But bonds forged in silence are fragile, and as Ember's fear clashed with her hunger, her wild instincts with her fragile trust every day felt like walking on the edge of a knife. Still in those early weeks, something remarkable began to happen. Ember, once frozen in terror at the sight of a human, began to lift her head when Sarah approached. She would stay a moment longer before retreating. She would sniff the air when food was placed near her. Small, almost invisible shifts, but to Sarah they were signs of hope. Signs that this broken wolf dog might one day believe in kindness again. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it had begun. And for Ember, that meant everything. The first meeting between human and animal is never predictable. With Ember, it was like approaching a storm, silent, tense, and full of energy that could shift in any direction. Sarah remembers the day clearly. She carried a small bucket of venison scraps, the kind of high-value food the sanctuary used when introducing themselves to new rescues. She walked slowly, careful not to crunch too loudly on the gravel path. Every sound mattered. Every movement had weight. As she neared Ember's enclosure, she felt those golden eyes before she even saw them. They pierced through the wire fence, glowing with suspicion and fear. Ember's body was low to the ground, ears, flat tail tucked tight. Every muscle screamed, "Stay back." Sarah stopped 10 feet away. She crouched low, avoiding direct eye contact. In the language of wolves, staring is a challenge, so instead she angled her head slightly, showing submission, showing respect. Then she gently placed the bucket down. Minutes passed. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Wind stirred the pines. A crow called from a distance. Still, Ember did not move. Sarah began to speak. Not words meant to be understood, but a rhythm meant to calm. "It's okay, girl. You're safe here. No one will hurt you anymore." Her voice was soft, steady, like water flowing over stones. She didn't approach further. She simply sat down on the earth, folding her hands into her lap. For Ember, this was new. Humans had always meant danger, hunger, or commands she could never understand. But this human was still. This human did not push. The standoff stretched on. 10 minutes. 20. Sarah didn't flinch, didn't check her watch, didn't break the fragile silence. She just sat there, letting Ember decide. And then, movement. Ember shifted her weight, nostrils flaring. The smell of venison was too strong, too tempting. Slowly, she inched forward, paws hesitant on the dirt. Her head lowered, shoulders tense, ready to bolt at the slightest sound. Sarah kept her gaze soft, her breathing even. She didn't reach out. She didn't move an inch. Step by step, Ember closed the gap until her muzzle hovered just above the bucket. She sniffed once, twice. Then, with a quick, almost guilty motion, she snapped up a piece of meat and retreated to the shadows. It was over in seconds. But to Sarah, it felt like lightning striking the earth. That single act, a frightened wolf dog taking food in the presence of a human, was the first thread in a fragile bridge of trust. But Ember wasn't done testing her. She returned again and again, each time stealing another scrap and darting back. Her eyes never left Sarah. There was no wagging tail, no playful curiosity, only a cautious hunger pushing her forward. By the time the bucket was empty, Sarah could feel her heartbeat echoing in her chest. She didn't celebrate. She didn't clap or cheer. She simply whispered, "Good girl, Ember. You did it." That night, Ember howled for the first time at the sanctuary. It was a raw, unsteady sound, like a voice long forgotten, finding its way back. The other wolf dogs answered their howls, rising in chorus across the valley. For the team, it was a sign Ember was beginning to awaken. But awakening a wolf dog is not without risk. Trust is fragile. One wrong step can shatter progress. And Ember, still haunted by years of captivity, carried her fears like scars across her soul. Over the next days, Sarah repeated the ritual. Food, silence, presence. Each time, Ember would test the distance, creep closer, and retreat. Slowly, the space between them shrank. Until one morning, something remarkable happened. Sarah placed the food, as usual, then settled onto the ground. Ember approached, not rushing, not retreating. She picked up a piece of meat, then hesitated. Her golden eyes lifted, locking with Sarah's for the first time. The gaze was intense, burning, but it was not aggression. It was a question. "Can I trust you?" Sarah held her breath. She didn't move. She simply let the moment hang in the air. And then Ember turned away, carrying her food back to the shadows. It was the briefest of eye contacts, but it meant everything. It was the start of recognition that Sarah was not just another human, but perhaps something different, someone she might one day trust. That night, Sarah wrote in her journal, "Today." Ember looked at me. Not through me, at me. I don't know if she'll ever forgive the past, but maybe, just maybe, she can begin again. The fateful encounter had taken place, and though it seemed small to an outsider, a hungry animal eating in front of a human, for Ember and Sarah, it was the beginning of a bond that would change both of their lives. The question now was, Could that bond survive the trials yet to come? Trust does not bloom overnight. It grows slowly like wildflowers pushing through cracks in stone. For Ember and Sarah, the days that followed were a test of patience, courage, and survival itself. At first, progress was fragile. Ember's body was weak from malnourishment. Her fur was dull, her ribs visible beneath her skin. Each meal was a battle between her fear of humans and her desperate hunger. But with every day that Sarah returned, same voice, same calm presence, Ember's fear loosened its grip just a little. Still caring for a wolf dog is not the same as caring for a dog. Ember's instincts pulled her toward the wild. She circled her enclosure at night, ears twitching at distant sounds. Sometimes she howled, her voice raw, calling into the mountains as if searching for something she had lost. Other times, she refused to eat if Sarah lingered too long. The sanctuary team knew this delicate balance well. Too much pressure, and Ember would shut down. Too little presence, and she would never learn to trust. Sarah chose the middle path. She never forced, never demanded. She let Ember set the pace. The first major challenge came when Ember fell ill. One morning, Sarah noticed her food untouched. Ember lay curled in the corner, her breathing, shallow eyes dull. Panic spread through the sanctuary. With wolf dogs, illness can turn deadly fast. The veterinary team arrived carrying tranquilizer darts, syringes, and medical kits, but approaching Ember was risky. If she panicked, she could injure herself against the fencing. Sarah stood nearby, speaking softly, trying to keep her calm as the vet prepared the tranquilizer. The dart hit, Ember staggered, and for the first time Sarah touched her. Gently, she laid her hand on Ember's fur as the medicine took hold. It was coarse, tangled, but warm. Sarah whispered, "You're not alone anymore. We'll get you through this." The diagnosis was dehydration and a minor infection treatable with fluids and antibiotics. For days the team worked around the clock. Ember, though weak, allowed Sarah's presence during treatment. It was as if she knew they were helping her. Slowly, she regained her strength. The moment she stood and ate again, the sanctuary erupted in relief. This was the first small victory. But Ember had more lessons to teach. Weeks later, as summer storms rolled over the Rockies, Ember revealed another side of herself. During one particularly violent thunderstorm, lightning split the sky and rain hammered the enclosure. Instead of hiding, Ember lifted her head and howled into the storm. It was a wild, primal sound, half wolf, half something else, rising above the thunder. Sarah watched from under a raincoat, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ember was claiming her voice, her power, her place in the world. But survival was not just about storms and sickness. It was also about learning to coexist with humans. One afternoon, Ember surprised everyone. Sarah had brought a long strip of venison tied to a rope, a kind of enrichment exercise. She dragged it slowly through the grass, letting Ember's hunting instincts engage. At first, Ember was cautious, but then instinct took over. She pounced, jaws snapping, paws kicking up dirt. For a moment, she was alive in a way no cage could contain. Sarah laughed, the sound blending with Ember's growl of triumph. It was play, not the play of a dog fetching a ball, but the raw, fierce play of a creature rediscovering who she was. These bonding exercises became daily rituals. Sometimes Sarah would sit near the fence with a book reading aloud as Ember circled closer. Other times she would scatter food to encourage foraging. Slowly, Ember began to linger nearby, no longer retreating into shadows the moment Sarah arrived. Yet the road was not without setbacks. On one visit, Ember lunged unexpectedly at the fence, teeth flashing. It was not an attack, but a surge of instinct, her wild side breaking through. Sarah's heart raced, but she didn't run. Instead, she steadied her breathing and whispered, "It's okay, Ember. I know you're scared. I'm still here." when that moment reminded everyone Ember would never be fully tame. She was not meant to be. Trust did not mean erasing her wildness. It meant respecting it. The sanctuary faced external challenges too. Inspections from wildlife officials meant constant scrutiny. Could Ember be safely housed? Was the sanctuary following every law, every regulation? Each report carried the risk of forcing Ember into relocation, or worse. Sarah fought quietly behind the scenes, ensuring every standard was met, every enclosure secure, every logbook precise. Ember's survival depended not just on compassion, but on compliance with the law. The greatest test of their bond came during a brutal winter cold snap. Temperatures plunged below zero, snow piling high around the sanctuary. Power flickered, supplies ran low. Ember's water buckets froze solid each night, her food stiff with ice. Sarah trudged up the hill daily, breaking ice with a hammer, hauling in fresh meat despite the biting wind. Her face burned, her fingers numb, but she never skipped a day. One morning, as she worked to crack the ice, Ember approached silently. She stood just a few feet away, watching. For the first time, she didn't retreat. She stayed her breath, forming clouds in the icy air. Sarah froze, waiting. Then Ember lowered her head slightly, not submission, but acknowledgement. It was not touch, not yet, but it was closeness. It was trust. Sarah smiled through chattering teeth. "We're in this together, Ember." In those hard months, they both survived not just the cold, but the doubts that threatened to pull them apart. By spring, Ember had transformed. Her fur shone under the sun. Her body grew strong, her eyes brighter. She no longer looked like a shadow of an animal, but like a creature reborn. And beside her enclosure, Sarah felt a change in herself too. She had learned patience beyond measure, resilience she never knew she had. The bond between them was not simple, not perfect. It was fragile, unpredictable, and wild. But it was real. And it was growing stronger every day. Still, Ember's story was far from over. Because, when the wild calls, even the strongest bonds are tested. Every story has a moment when everything hangs in the balance. For Ember, that moment came one summer when the mountains themselves seemed determined to test her will to survive and Sarah's devotion to keep her safe. The Colorado Rockies are breathtaking, but they are also unforgiving. Storms can roll in within minutes, turning blue skies into chaos. Wildfires, too, are a constant threat, dry pine needles and fierce winds creating the perfect storm. And it was fire that would bring Ember and Sarah to their greatest trial. It began as a thin line of smoke on the horizon. At first, the sanctuary staff thought little of it. Summer wildfires were common, and most burned far away. But by the second day, the winds shifted. The sky turned a sickly orange ash falling like snow, and by nightfall, flames glowed faintly from the ridge across the valley. Panic rippled through the sanctuary. Dozens of rescued wolf dogs lived there, each with their own story, their own needs. Evacuation was no simple task. Wolf dogs cannot just be loaded into trucks like pets. They require specialized transport crates, sedation in some cases, and endless patience. The team had prepared for such emergencies, but no amount of drills could erase the fear when fire became real. Sarah rushed to Ember's enclosure. Ember sensed the danger instantly. Her nose twitched, ears high, pacing back and forth. The acrid scent of smoke stirred her instincts. Wolves run from fire. But Ember had no forest to flee into, only fences. The team worked fast. Trucks backed into the sanctuary. Crates were lined with straw water bottles strapped to the sides. The air grew hotter, the crackle of flames carried on the wind. Ember's turn came, but she balked at the sight of the crate. Her body stiffened, lips curling, a low growl vibrating in her chest. To her, the crate was no escape. It was a prison, a reminder of everything she had endured. Sarah's heart pounded. If Ember refused, they couldn't force her without risking injury. Time was running out. She dropped to her knees outside the enclosure, her voice shaking but steady. Ember, listen to me. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But this isn't a cage. This is the way out. Trust me, please. For long seconds, Ember stood frozen, torn between terror and instinct. Smoke swirled around them, the sky darkening. A fire engine roared in the distance. Sarah knew that if Ember bolted, they might lose her forever. Then it happened. Ember stepped forward, muscles tense but moving. Slowly, step by step, she approached the crate. Sarah guided her with gentle words, never breaking eye contact. Ember paused at the entrance, nostrils flaring, and then, with a hesitant leap, she entered. The door clicked shut. Sarah exhaled in relief, tears streaking her ash-stained face. Ember had chosen to trust her at the very moment when it mattered most. The evacuation was chaos. Dozens of crates loaded onto trucks, volunteers shouting directions. Flames visible now from the sanctuary's edge. Sarah climbed into the back of one transport, crouching beside Ember's crate as the truck rumbled down the mountain road. Ember pressed her muzzle against the bars, eyes locked on Sarah's. They rode together through the smoke, two survivors bound by a fragile thread of trust. Hours later, the sanctuary team reached a safe zone, a temporary holding facility, far from the fire. Exhausted, covered in soot, they unloaded the animals one by one. Some wolf dogs howled in fear, others cowered in silence. But Ember stepped out of her crate and for the first time did not run to the farthest corner. Instead, she lingered near Sarah, her golden eyes softer, calmer. The fire raged for days, consuming acres of forest, forcing communities to flee. But thanks to swift action, every animal at the sanctuary survived. When the danger finally passed and the team returned, the sanctuary grounds were scarred, blackened trees, scorched fences, the scent of smoke clinging to the air. Yet amid the devastation, a strange beauty emerged. Ember ran through her enclosure, her movements strong, her howl echoing through the valley. It was not the howl of fear she had given when first rescued, nor the raw cry during the thunderstorm months before. This was something new, proud, defiant, alive. Sarah listened, goosebumps rising on her arms. That howl was not just survival, it was triumph. But the climax of Ember's story was not just about fire. It was about the bond that had carried her through it. Because in that moment of crisis, Ember had made a choice. She had stepped into the crate not because she wanted to, but because she trusted Sarah enough to believe there was something beyond the fire. And for Sarah, that trust was everything. She wrote in her journal that night, "Today Ember saved herself, but she also saved me. She showed me that even in the darkest smoke, trust can light the way." The wildfire left scars, yes, but it also left proof. Proof that Ember's journey from broken captive to survivor was real. Proof that even the wildest hearts can choose connection when it matters most. The sanctuary rebuilt stronger than before. Volunteers hammered new posts, stretched new fencing, replanted charred soil with seedlings. Life slowly returned to the valley. And at the center of it all was Ember, watching with her golden eyes, a living reminder of resilience. Still, the fire had awakened a new challenge. Ember was growing stronger, wilder, more restless. Each day she tested the fences more. Each night her howls grew louder, echoing farther into the mountains. She was no longer the trembling creature crouched in the shadows. She was becoming something greater, something harder to contain. And as Sarah listened to those howls, she knew a new question was rising. Could Ember remain here behind fences forever? Or was her destiny calling her somewhere beyond the sanctuary gates? Surviving a wildfire was one thing, but surviving human judgment that was something Ember could not simply outrun. In the months after the fire, the sanctuary began to stabilize. Fences repaired, new shelters built, the forest slowly healing. Ember herself grew stronger. Her coat gleamed silver under the sun, her muscles filling out with every run across her enclosure. She was no longer the shadow rescued from a cage. She was fierce, alive, undeniable. But with strength came new challenges. Ember tested the fences more often now, pacing along the edges, nose pressed against the mesh. Her howls carried farther, reaching the neighboring valleys. Ranchers reported hearing them at night, stirring unease. To many locals, wolves and wolf dogs were threats, symbols of danger to livestock and pets. Whispers began. What if the wolf dogs escape? What if they harm someone's cattle? Even though no sanctuary animal had ever harmed livestock, fear spreads faster than facts. Then came the inspection. Colorado wildlife officials arrived unannounced one morning, clipboards in hand. Their job ensured compliance with every regulation governing the keeping of wolf dogs. The sanctuary welcomed them in, but tension hung thick. One mistake, one loose fence post, one missing form, and Ember's fate could change overnight. The inspectors walked slowly, their eyes sharp. They paused at Ember's enclosure. She stood, tall ears forward, golden eyes locked on them. To the officials, she was not Ember the survivor. She was a high-content wolf dog, unpredictable, possibly dangerous. Their pens scratched across paper. Sarah's stomach twisted. She knew Ember was safe here, but she also knew the laws were strict. Wolf dogs were legal in Colorado only under certain conditions. Any violation could mean confiscation or euthanasia. Sarah clenched her fists, praying nothing would go wrong. Questions came like arrows. What's her lineage? How high is her wolf content? How often is she fed? How secure is the fencing? Sarah and the staff answered calmly, showing records, pointing to reinforced steel posts, double-gated entrances, feeding logs. Every detail mattered. But one inspector frowned. Ember's pacing seemed restless, even agitated. He made a note. Animal displays high stress. Consider relocation. Sarah's heart sank. Relocation often meant transfer to facilities with less freedom, less care, or worse. She stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. Ember has trauma. Pacing is her coping mechanism. But she is healthy, safe, and closely monitored. This sanctuary is the best place for her. The inspector glanced up, skeptical. Sarah held his gaze. Behind her, Ember let out a long, low howl. It echoed through the valley, carrying both defiance and longing. The inspection ended without resolution. Weeks of waiting followed. The community remained divided. Some neighbors supported the sanctuary, grateful for its role in giving animals like Ember a chance. Others wrote complaints, fearing the animals might escape. Local newspapers ran headlines, "Wolf dogs raise concerns in Mountain Valley." For Sarah, the waiting was torture. Every day she visited Ember, she wondered, would this be the last week Ember remained here? Would officials decide her fate with a stroke of a pen? At night, Ember's howls grew louder, almost mournful. Sarah sat outside the enclosure, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "I'll fight for you. No matter what they say, I won't let them take you away." Finally, the letter arrived. The sanctuary was in compliance for now. Ember could stay. Relief washed over the team, but Sarah knew the battle wasn't over. The next inspection could bring the same threat. Ember's very existence in human care was a constant negotiation between compassion and law. And the sanctuary's challenges weren't only legal. Donations had dropped after the wildfire. Repairs were costly. Feeding dozens of wolf dogs was an endless burden. Some volunteers left unable to keep up with the strain. Ember's care required resources, and every shortfall put pressure on Sarah and the team. Then came the hardest question of all, from within the sanctuary itself. Some staff members began to wonder aloud, was it right to keep Ember here at all? She was strong, restless, more wolf than dog. Wouldn't she be better off in the wild where she could run free? Sarah shook her head each time. Ember had never learned to hunt, never lived in a pack. She carried too much human imprint, too little wilderness knowledge. Releasing her would be a death sentence. And yet, Sarah could not deny what she saw in Ember's eyes, the longing for something beyond fences. The conflict tore at Sarah. The law demanded strict control. The community demanded reassurance. The sanctuary demanded resources. And Ember demanded freedom, even if she could never truly have it. Caught in the middle, Sarah faced sleepless nights, haunted by a question. How long could Ember's fragile sanctuary last? Because sooner or later, choices would have to be made. And when they were, hearts would break. Every journey reaches a crossroads. For Sarah and Ember, it came quietly after years of struggle, love, and fragile trust. The question was no longer if Ember could survive, but where she truly belonged. By now, Ember had grown into her full power. Her coat shimmered in silver and black, her stride confident, her howl commanding. She was no longer the trembling creature rescued from a cage. She was a wolf dog on the edge of something greater. But with her growth came restlessness. Each night, Ember paced along the far fence line, staring into the mountains beyond. Sometimes she pressed her muzzle to the wind, catching scents carried from miles away. Her howls grew louder, fuller, echoing like a call to a world she had never truly known. Sarah watched these moments with a heavy heart. She knew Ember could never be fully wild, but she also knew the fences no longer felt like enough. Keeping Ember here forever, contained, felt less like safety and more like a compromise. The sanctuary board began to discuss options. Some argued Ember should remain safe, cared for, a living symbol of resilience. Others whispered about partnerships with larger sanctuaries, places with vast enclosures, measured in acres where wolf dogs could roam more freely. The debates were fierce, emotional, and filled with uncertainty. For Sarah, it was agony. Ember was not just another rescue, she was family. Every scar on Ember's body felt like part of Sarah's own. Letting her go felt impossible. And yet, deep inside, Sarah knew love is not about possession. It is about giving what is best, even when it hurts. The decision came one autumn morning. A new sanctuary far larger had agreed to take Ember. Their grounds stretched across rolling hills dotted with trees and streams. It was still captivity, yes, but it was as close to freedom as Ember could ever safely have. Sarah sat outside Ember's enclosure that evening, journal in hand. Her voice trembled as she read aloud, "Tomorrow you leave. I don't know how to say goodbye. You've taught me patience, courage, and love without words. If you find happiness in your new home, then my heart will be at peace, but part of me will always stay with you." The next day, the transport crate returned. The same kind of crate that once symbolized fear now represented hope. Ember hesitated, muscles taut, remembering. Sarah knelt just as she had during the wildfire evacuation. She whispered, "It's okay, Ember. This time it's not escape. It's a gift. Trust me, just once more." Ember's golden eyes searched hers. Then slowly, she stepped inside. The door clicked shut, sealing a chapter of their shared story. The drive to the new sanctuary was long, winding through mountains painted with autumn colors. Sarah rode in silence beside Ember's crate, her hand resting against the bars. Ember pressed her muzzle there, as if understanding this was their final journey together. When they arrived, the gates opened to wide fields and forest paths. The new enclosure stretched farther than Ember had ever known, with space to run streams to drink from and other wolf dogs already roaming. The moment the crate opened, Ember stepped out cautiously. She sniffed the ground, lifted her head to the wind, and then, without looking back, ran. Her body flowed like water muscles, stretching with every stride, as if she had been waiting her whole life for this. Sarah watched, tears streaming down her face. Part of her had hoped Ember would turn just once to look back, but Ember didn't. She disappeared into the trees, her howl rising moments later, fierce and free. For a moment, Sarah's heart broke. Then she realized Ember's lack of farewell was not rejection. It was trust. Ember no longer needed to cling to the past. She was ready to claim her own life. As Sarah turned to leave, a sound stopped her. From deep within the forest, Ember's howl rose again. This time, it was not wild or desperate. It was steady, powerful, and filled with something Sarah had never heard before: gratitude. Sarah smiled through her tears. "Goodbye, Ember. Be free in the way you were meant to be." The farewell was not just an ending. It was a release, a gift. And though their paths diverged, the bond they shared would never truly break. Farewells are never the end. They are bridges leading to new chapters we cannot yet see. Ember's story did not stop the day she ran into her new sanctuary. In truth, that was only the beginning of a life she was finally allowed to live. Months passed after the transfer. Sarah returned to her routines at the UOLF sanctuary, caring for other rescues who needed her calm patience. Yet there was always a silence at the edge of her days, a space where Ember had once been. The enclosure on the hill stood empty now, the earth still marked by Ember's pacing. Sometimes on quiet evenings, Sarah thought she could hear a distant howl carried by the wind, though she knew it was only memory. Then, one crisp winter morning, an update arrived. A package with photos and a letter from Ember's new caretakers. Sarah opened it slowly, hands trembling. The photos took her breath away. Ember, strong and radiant, bounding through snow with other wolf dogs by her side. Her fur gleamed against the white, her eyes bright, her stride powerful. She was no longer a shadow haunted by the past. She was alive in the present, a leader among her kind. The letter told stories of Ember exploring streams, climbing ridges, even playing with a younger wolf dog. The staff wrote, "She is thriving. She has found her place." Sarah pressed the photos to her chest, tears falling freely. In Ember's freedom, she found her own peace. But the epilogue was not only about Ember. It was about Sarah too. Because Ember had changed her, not just as a volunteer, but as a human being. Sarah began speaking at schools and community events, sharing Ember's journey. She told children about wolf dogs, what they were, why they could not be pets, why they needed sanctuaries. She showed Ember's photos, her scars, her triumphs. And each time she ended with the same words, "Every living being deserves a chance to heal. Ember taught me that trust can rise from ashes, if only we give it time." The sanctuary itself also grew stronger. Ember's story touched donors and communities far beyond Colorado. Support poured in. With it, new enclosures were built, fences, reinforced medical facilities expanded. More wolf dogs were rescued, their lives saved by the space Ember had helped create through her legacy. And Sarah. She kept her promise to Ember. She visited the new sanctuary once, months later. She stood quietly at the edge of a vast enclosure, scanning the tree line. At first she saw nothing. Then movement, a flash of silver fur. Ember emerged, her body powerful, her eyes still glowing gold. For a long moment, their gazes locked. Ember did not rush forward, did not whine or cower. She simply stood tall and strong, the forest behind her. Then she lifted her head and howled, her voice rolling across the hills. Sarah smiled, whispering through tears, "I hear you, Ember. I always will." As it was not a reunion in the way people imagine. Ember did not leap into Sarah's arms. She did not cling. She did not need to. Her howl was enough. It was proof of survival, proof of freedom, proof of trust that had never truly broken. That night, back at her cabin, Sarah wrote her final journal entry about Ember. "She is where she belongs, and so am I. Love is not holding on, it is letting another soul fly." As the years went by, Ember became a legend of the Sanctuary Network. Her story was told at fundraising galas, in classrooms, in documentaries. To the world, she was a symbol of resilience. To Sarah, she would always be more a friend who had spoken without words, who had taught her the meaning of patience, courage, and release. In the end, Ember's howl did not fade into silence. It lived on in the hearts of everyone who heard her story, in the forests where her voice once echoed, and in the spirit of those who choose compassion over fear. And as the Colorado sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Sarah often stood outside listening to the wind. Somewhere far away, a wolf dog howled, and she knew Ember was free. Free in body, free in spirit, free at last. Ember's journey reminds us of something we often forget. Survival is not enough. Every creature, wolf dog or human, deserves more than just existence. They deserve dignity, freedom, and the chance to heal. When Ember was first rescued, she was broken, trembling, too afraid to even eat in the presence of people. For many, she might have been considered a lost cause. But patience, compassion, and respect proved otherwise. She grew stronger, she found her voice, and eventually she found her place. Her story is not just about a single wolf dog. It's about all the animals caught between our world and theirs, bred for profit, abandoned when inconvenient, feared because of what they are not who they are. Ember stands as a symbol for the thousands like her who may never have their stories told. For Sarah, Ember was a teacher. She showed that trust cannot be forced, only earned. That healing takes time, silence, and presence. That love is not holding tighter, but letting go when the time comes. These are lessons for all of us about patience, about compassion, about courage. And for us as viewers, Ember's journey calls us to action. We may not all stand inside a sanctuary or face down wildfire smoke, but we can make choices that matter. We can support sanctuaries like WOLF and others across the country. We can refuse to buy into industries that exploit animals for profit. We can teach our children the truth that wild animals are not pets, not commodities, but lives worthy of respect. Because every howl we save, every story we share, brings the world closer to compassion. So the next time you hear a wolf's cry in the distance, or see golden eyes staring back from the shadows, remember Ember. Remember that within every creature lies the spark of survival waiting for someone to believe in it. And remember, you have the power to be that someone. If Ember's story moved, you don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel to hear more true stories of survival and compassion. Share this video so others can learn about the importance of sanctuaries. And if you can support these sanctuaries directly, because they are the reason animals like Ember get their second chance. Together, we can make sure that Ember's howl will never be silenced. Together, we can ensure that the next animal in need doesn't have to wait alone in the dark. This is Ember's legacy, and now it's our responsibility.